Great. All right. So welcome again. Just put your name, affiliation, and organization in the sign-in sheet. Let's see here. We're going to do a welcome from the co-leads leadership. And then Miss Margaret is going to acknowledge. So we didn't get to do, we had some other stuff last month for Women's History Month, but we did not want to let the month go by without, kind of honoring the greatness of women in general and some great women of West Oakland. And so we're going to do that. And then we'll have a report back from Nicole of West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. We've got a report from Maria Harris and the Environmental Defense Fund, and then a couple of report backs, one from Shana and one from Alicia Parker on the building electrification roadmap for existing buildings and the truck management plan. And then we'll do next steps. So again, hope all is well. And we'll just kind of let these last folks in. We can't move on without Wanda and Henry. We don't want to leave them out. So actually, let's go to the co-leads, to the management first. We're going to hear from both Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We're going to hear from Allison, and then we'll also hear from Miss Margaret. Miss Margaret, you want to start?
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Glad everyone's here and good spirits. And take it back.
All right.
No.
Short and sweet. Thank you. Thank you kindly. Allison.
Hi. Welcome everyone, and happy to be celebrating Women's History Month. We're a little bit late, but that's okay. Better late than never. And I think, like Miss Margaret, I will keep it really brief and say, let's get rolling. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you. So we're going to start. We have just a couple of people that, just that are like admired in West Oakland, but just have done just incredible work in the community, and we wanted to honor them. The first one, let's see here, is Ellen Wyrick Parkinson. And do you want to take it away, Ms. Margaret, or do you want me to read it?
I'm not going to read it all, but Ms. Parkinson was a force to be dealt with. She was the first Black woman, from my understanding, that worked for the Oakland newspaper back in the day, and she's been instrumental in a lot of boards, planning, development over the years of and advocacy for West Oakland. So I worked very close with her with around two things: the West Oakland advisory for the Army base and the redevelopment process that we had at one time for the city for West Oakland.
Yeah, it's hard to get in a couple of minutes like all folks have done. The only other highlights that I would highlight is one around the freeway that collapsed. She was instrumental, like a lot of freeways, train tracks, transportation infrastructure. It really cuts through our neighborhoods, and when that freeway collapsed, she wanted to make sure that it wasn't built back in the same way as before, cutting off the neighborhood, and was instrumental in the development of the 1 acre Cypress Freeway Memorial Park that's there at 13th and 13th and Mandela.
No, it's
There,
14th and Mandela.
14th and Mandela, right there on the corner. I guess a couple of the other groups, Ms. Margaret mentioned, there's the West Oakland Community Advisory Group, the Oakland Base Reuse Authority, as she mentioned. She was the person who led the charge to have the Oak Center neighborhood developed as a historic district by the city. She was the 2008 Mother of the Year. Alameda County Historical Society, League of Women Voters, Alameda County Parks and Recreation Historical Commission, West Oakland Project Area Committee, that's the PAC, when we had redevelopment. And then also I worked her a little bit when I was with the Oakland Community Land Trust. She was one of the first board members there. So we really, we lost Ms. Wyrick in 2017 at the ripe age of 94. And so she was really kind of an outstanding person. So from there, we want to move. We actually got a special guest. We are blessed to have Miss Queen Thurston here and her daughter Rana. So I'm not gonna butcher your bio, your history, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, hi, thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to read this for my mom. And again, like Ms. Dwyer, who I'm very familiar with, this of course doesn't cover it all, but these are some of the highlights that she wanted to make sure that I did mention. So Queen was born, and this is Queen Esther Thurston, for those who might not know. She was born in Marquez, Texas. Marquez is a small farm town. She was very proud of her dad's farming abilities. And she always says that first she is a mom and second a community activist. The family moved from Texas when she was 7 to Ada, Oklahoma. The time that she spent there was very happy. With the exception of 3 Native American families, this was basically a Black community. And at 12, she moved to Oakland. And she moved here via Western Pacific Railroad. Her father was a Pullman porter for that line. After high school, Queen graduated from the Fairmont Hayward School of Vocational Nursing and worked at Fairmont Alameda County Hospital. She worked in geriatrics, orthopedics, respiratory, and as the coordinator for the Alzheimer's respite unit. With regard to community work and activism, alongside with Frank Allen, Miss Annie Mae, Miss James Tolan, Miss Ollie White, all who were of the McClymonds High School Parent Teacher Association members. They work to counsel and mentor students of all grade levels for a 3-year commitment. She was appointed by Supervisor Keith Carson to represent his office on the Child Care Planning Council. And this was a very important job as it had to do with oversight for all of the child care centers. She was appointed by former City Councilwoman Natalie Boyton to the General Plan Congress, and their duty was to lay out plan guidelines for Oakland for the next 15 to 25 years after that. Basically, what, how, and why did you want Oakland to look like? What did you want Oakland to be? Queen was a founding member and chairman for 3 years for the Oakland Coalition for West Oakland Revitalization, or CWAR. They were under the tutorial and guidance of Miss Stephanie Floyd Johnson from the City Office of Economic Development and Employment to create a revitalization plan after the Loma Prieta earthquake. CWAR published 2 revitalization reports, West Oakland Visions and Strategies, Phase 1 report, which was a community plan of June 1995. And these reports have been referenced many times by planning groups since their printing. Queen hosted and was the executive director of the television show Queen's Court for 4 years on KBLC Channel 78 in West Oakland. The West Oakland Senior Center was a very important aspect of that program in that she felt seniors living alone and feeling isolated, that the Senior Center gave them something to do with dancing, exercise, excursions, and such. So these were events that were conducive to helping the mind and body. And for that reason, she made sure that the reports of what was happening at the Senior Center were a daily part of her show. She also had really good guests, just to name a few. Mr. Michael Lange, who most of you from Oakland are probably familiar with, producer, writer, and actor, musician, also was seen on Queen's Court with Mr. James Brooks, senior and actor and musician, with excerpts from the stage production, The Meeting, of Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Also Marvin X, a former member of the Black Arts Movement, and Dr. Hattie Carwell, director of the Museum of African American Technology, Mott Science Village. Dr. Don Bornett, retired Harlem Globetrotter, who was also inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame and wrote the book titled Is My Skin My Only Sin? Sam Golden, the captain of the All Black Fire Station in West Oakland, which is Engine 22, and he was also the first Black battalion chief to the Oakland Fire Department. And also Oscar Wright, some of you may be familiar with. He was an engineer and manager when the Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, was built, and supervised when the underwater tunnels were being built in the Oakland and San Francisco Bay Area. Mr. Wright has also been a longtime advocate for our children and wrote a book that was titled Locked Out by Design. She also wanted to say she couldn't possibly leave out the Association of Africans and African Americans. That group was her heart for the unification and growth of Africans worldwide and the study of classical African civilizations. Queen says that her prayer is for every human to live by truth, justice, and right order. And she also wanted to thank you all for including her today. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks. When we were coming up with this, I was gonna just like kind of do the Google thing and find some information. I'm like, hey, how about if I just call Rana? And she was, yes, so that was fantastic. We really, really appreciate you joining us today. All right, and I'll stop by and see you as well.
And can I just add, had you Googled, one of the things that you would have seen was WOW, or the West Oakland Web, which my mom has had for how many years now? 30 or so years. Ever since Loma Prieta, and it has events and activities that are happening in Oakland, primarily West Oakland. The website is down now, but I think if you were to type in WOW or West Oakland Web, it'll probably say that it's under repair or something, because I'm going to do a revamp of it. But I just wanted you guys to put it in your notes as someplace in the future to look to, someplace in the future to contact us if you have information or activities that you want to be posted there. We will be doing that. So that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And if you're just hearing some of those names and some of those acronyms, like if you've been here for any number of decades, you're like, wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time. So that's fantastic. Okay, so for those of you who joined us like kind of since I posted this, the sign-in sheet again is in the chat, and so we're going to move up. Can't do anything without Laura and Bill. So we're going to move to the co-leads report back, and we're going to hear from
Before you do that, real quick, Randolph, I have to really report out that Queen Thurston and Mrs. Parkinson were also my mentors, and I was their mentee when I first came to West Oakland.
That's awesome. Because we have Queen here, good job. You did a great job. Awesome. That is awesome. I just wanted to say thank you to her too. And I was just hoping we all could have just said thank you to her for all the work she's done and for being so instrumental in still having stuff going on right now today because of her. So thank you. Thank you. Last time I was over there, I got an incredible meal from Rana and a great tie that I still have. So thank you for my tie.
You're welcome. And you're always welcome for a meal anytime.
Right. I will take it. Received. Awesome. Okay, so we'll move to co-leads. Nicole?
Thanks, Randolph, and thank you for that beautiful presentation. I'm going to report back on our steering committee interest form, and we're going to introduce a couple new steering committee members, which we're really, really excited about.
This is not in the right order. Do you want me to? Okay, I'll just make this quick announcement first. We just wanted to give everyone a heads up that there are 3 meetings coming up for the Oakland general plan. There's one tomorrow. Oops. There's one tomorrow from 6 to 8. And then there's a environmental justice focus workshop that will be held twice, once on Friday at 9 and once on Saturday at 9. I'll put the link to the city's website where they list the Zoom information on there. And the city also recently published an EJ and racial equity baseline kind of map atlas report to support the EJ element, and then a more general map atlas. So I'll put the links for all that in the chat, and then the links are also in the slide deck. So sorry for the mishap on the slide ordering, and I'll pass it back to Nicole.
Thanks, Beth. We created an interest form for steering committee members. It's been shared with current steering committee members, and the intention behind it is, one, to grow the steering committee as we continue to develop our implementation teams for WOCAP, and also to make sure that we are representing, right, all demographics in all neighborhoods, specifically in West Oakland. Okay, I'm dropping the interest form in the chat for you guys. Some of the things that it highlights, right, is general information, right? Your name, affiliation. Do you live in West Oakland? Do you work in West Oakland? We also want to make sure that folks who are applying are mission aligned, right? What's your interest in air quality in general, and what's your interest in WOCAP specifically? What are some things that you hope to achieve and accomplish in the role? And again, equitable representation. If you know someone who might be interested, please feel free to share the interest form with them. I ask that if you're sharing it, that you actually know this person and you know at least a few of their core values, right? That way folks aren't just filling out a Google survey and, you know, padding a resume, right? I know that's not the makeup of this space, but just making sure that sending it to folks who are truly committed to this. And we're in conversation now with folks who are interested in joining the steering committee. And as of the last month, we've been able to add 3 more steering committee members to the AB 617 WOCAP team. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, Miss Bridget Cook, David Woolley, and Miss Rita Look. And
Albertia.
yes, I introduced her last month, but we are really excited that Miss Owens is also part of the steering committee recruitment and team. Any questions?
No questions?
Ms. Margaret, am I forgetting anything else?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay, that's all I
I
have.
will go back. No, I will go back. I'm also presenting the environmental justice elements for the Oakland general plan.
Hold on one more time. You're doing that later in the agenda today?
No,
Oh,
for the meeting of the
Oh,
7th and the 2
tomorrow.
meetings
Okay.
after that. I'm on
Okay.
the presenting.
gotcha. Okay. Any other questions, comments on the co-leads report back or the general plan or any other items?
Randolph, I just want to make a big, welcome to our new members and thank them for their commitment.
Absolutely.
And, it's hard to be enthusiastic over Zoom, but I want to make sure that they know that we all appreciate them for taking on this commitment. And we're looking forward to continuing to expand our community representation on the steering committee. So thank you all, Bridget, David, Rita, Ms. Albertia. Thank you all for taking this on.
Awesome. You all are in great company.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In great company. All right. Now we've got a couple of implementation project report backs. We're going to start.
Randolph, I thought Maria was going first.
I just opened the slide deck. And
Okay.
that's what
Well,
came up.
Maria's going first on the agenda.
Okay.
Shane
Okay.
is not on
So,
yet.
okay.
So
let's
you
do
can
that.
let Maria.
Yeah,
do the
Maria, you
agenda.
have hosting privileges. So take it away. We're going to hear from Maria Harris.
Thanks, Randolph. And I'm going to be co-presenting tonight with Marjane Moini from Physicians for Social Responsibility, SFBA, and my colleague. Sorry, I'm just getting. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, and my colleague, Kelsey Meisenhelder from Environmental Defense Fund. Are those slides coming through okay?
Yep, we can see them.
Great. Yeah, so thanks so much for inviting us to present to the steering committee tonight. We're really glad to be here. Looking forward to sharing some of what the Health Equity Advisory Committee has been discussing and working on over the past 6 months since we convened the group in August last summer, and presenting some of our proposed plans for activities moving forward and getting feedback from the steering committee. I am, I think, going to start by turning over to Marjane.
Do you want to advance the slide?
Yes.
Hi. So we wanted to start the conversation with just defining what health equity means. So Center for Disease Control defines health equity when everyone has the opportunity to be as healthy as possible. If we give the same opportunities to everyone, we will not achieve health equality because everyone has different circumstances. So health equity recognizes that people need different opportunities and different tool sets to achieve the same level of health. In order to achieve health equity, we have to address injustices, both historical and contemporary, overcome economic, social, and other obstacles to health and healthcare, and eliminate preventable health disparities. And Center for Disease Control also defines social determinants of health as conditions in places where people live that affect a wide range of health and quality of life and risk and health outcomes. So the first one would be economic stability. So economic, as you know, in US, 1 out of 10 people live in poverty. So poverty leads to lack of access to healthy food, healthcare, and housing, and that would affect people's health outcome. Education, access, and quality affects people's health because people with higher education are more likely to live healthier and longer. Children from low-income families, children with disabilities, children that experience social discrimination, they are more likely not to graduate from high school, go to college, and as a result, not to get to have secure, high-paying jobs. These children are more likely as adults to have diabetes, heart disease, and depression. Healthcare and healthcare access and quality also is important. As you all know, one out of 10 people in US does not have health insurance. When people don't have access to healthcare, it's less likely they would have a screening test. It would be less likely they would have preventative measures taken, and they would not be as healthy as others who do. Neighborhood built an environment. West Oakland is a good example of that. Proximity to highway, truck routes, exposure to air pollution, lack of access to green space can all affect people's health. Social and community contexts are also important. When people live in communities where there's high rate of violence, discrimination, or jailed parents in families, they have they're less healthy. In addition, Center for Disease Control recognizes racism as a serious threat to public health. Racism affects the mental and physical health of millions of people in US. Racism can affect families' income. A typical white family has 8 times the wealth of a typical Black family and 5 times the wealth of a typical Hispanic family. These are rooted in discriminatory government policies and institutional practices that have been in place across the states, but also specifically in California, starting from 1850s, going into 1990s. Among these practices, redlining stands out. So redlining, or what was based on Homeowners Loan Act in 1933, when they developed residential safety maps, was based on certain factors. They included terrain, age, and the type of the building, but also the threat of infiltration by racially diverse population. This affected Black, Indigenous, people of color communities from building intergenerational wealth. In fact, when you look at the wealth, we actually went through that already. Sorry, kind of swapped this slide. So historical, this is a new study that was published last month by Josh Apte's group that looked at redlining maps from 1933 and the air pollution maps from the air pollution estimates from 2010, and also racial distribution in different cities across US. And what they saw was that the air pollution very much actually mapped into redlining. The two maps pretty much overlapped. There was nitric oxide concentration was 50% higher in communities that were considered undesirable by safety maps compared to communities that were considered safe. And there was an article in New York Times that we're going to show that actually nicely showed the maps from Oakland. And on the left, you can see the maps from 1930s safety maps that, and then in the middle, you can see the nitrous oxide distribution, and you can see that the higher distribution of nitric oxide, concentration of nitric oxide very much matches the red line communities. And the same, you can see the concentration of, or the percentage of non-white population that perfectly matches the same, air pollution map and the redlining map. So you can see that the policies that were put in place in 1933 affect the built environment, the communities we live in, the hazard that they're exposed to in 2010. From 2010 to now, we don't know if much has changed. But the article also nicely highlighted the work of West Oakland Environmental Indicator Project. And there was a picture of Ms. Margaret there as well. I'll hand it over back to Kelsey or to Maria.
Thanks, Marjorie. So with that context for sort of why we are focused on health equity, why one of the sort of motivating reasons for this committee's effort, we wanted to just give a little bit of a overview or reminder of what the mission was for the Health Equity Advisory Committee, who the participants have been, provide an initial report back to the steering committee on what we've been discussing, some recommendations that we have about data sources in particular that could be useful to the efforts of the steering committee, and our proposed process for providing support moving forward. And then, as I said, walking through some available data and the slides, the full set of slides that were distributed ahead of time includes more detail on these data sources, as well as highlights of the discussions that we've had in the meetings we've held to date, but we won't cover those today. So the Health Equity Advisory Committee was formed last August in response to a request from the WOCAP co-leads to provide technical assistance to the WOCAP steering committee in support of efforts to implement the WOCAP strategies and track progress in reducing the disproportionate health impacts of air pollution in West Oakland. And the participants include representatives of the West Oakland community, as well as local and regional agencies, healthcare stakeholders, and academic researchers. And we had approximately monthly meetings between, in our initial 6-month term, between August and January. We've had a pretty consistent set of members throughout, and all the folks who have participated are mentioned here, and you can see there's been a large number of people participating from a really broad and diverse range of organizations. So in the initial report back tonight, we wanted to share some currently available data sets that the advisory committee wants to make sure WOCAP is aware of, and some thoughts about how those data could be useful to WOCAP activities and implementation work. Overview of these data sets, and then our proposed plan for continuing the work of the HGAC. So throughout our activities, we've been focused on a number of questions that were posed to us by the WOCAP co-leads, and then discussed during the July meeting of the steering committee and refined based on feedback from the steering committee. And one of the central questions has been what are the health data tools and research needed to inform local and regional air pollution regulation and track progress on reducing health impacts of air pollution in West Oakland. And through our discussions, we've really sort of identified 4 important types of data that are necessary, and that we think are available and potentially useful right now. So those include air pollution concentrations, health impact estimates, health indicators, and vulnerability indicators. And I'm going to talk through a few examples of each of these types of data and some of the types of questions that they might help answer. And our plan is to pause after each of these types to have some discussion and sort of have Q&A throughout this presentation. So the first is air pollution concentrations. I think this is a data type that most of us who have been participating in these steering committee meetings have seen a lot of. Some examples of this type of data are the regulatory monitoring that the Air District conducts, some mobile monitoring. There was a mobile monitoring campaign in 2015 to 2016 that generated the map that you see on the right of street level estimates of air pollution across West and downtown Oakland. And you can see on that map the location of the West Oakland regulatory monitor as well as the orange X. There are also other types of air pollution data being collected by low-cost sensors, including the Purple Air network, which collects fine particulate data. And some of the types of questions these data can answer are, how have pollution levels varied over time at the West Oakland regulatory monitor on West Grand? So it's a single monitor in a single location, but it has a long, it measures every hour of every day and has a long history of measurements that can speak to how pollution at that location has changed over time. If you're interested in particular pollution and on a particular street, the mobile data can help speak to the average annual level of air pollution on a particular street in a neighborhood during that 2015 to 2016 campaign, and then how that level of pollution compares to another part of the neighborhood or another street. And there's been efforts to collect additional hyperlocal data subsequently, and once that data becomes available, questions like, how did this average change between 2015 to 2016 campaign and subsequent campaign? How did that average change, and potentially how did that average change after a project was implemented? So I wanted to stop there and see if there are any questions on what we've discussed so far, and in particular, air pollution concentrations.
Miss Margaret, is your hand up from before?
No, sorry.
Oh, Wanda?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Coincidentally, I think it was Annette Miller that insisted on one of these monitors being put into the Hoover Elementary schoolyard and garden. Because Annette had insisted, even though it wasn't part of this, and I'm wondering if you happen to have that data. Because it might be very interesting to compare the Hoover Foster neighborhood to Prescott.
Do you know if was that a Purple Air monitor or?
It was on a very big long pole and had a little box on the top of it.
Okay.
And the Exploratorium
Oh,
came and installed it and then eventually took it out again.
I see Scott has his hand up.
Scott?
I'm not familiar with what campaign that was, but Miss Margaret or Brian might know.
That was two different, that's a whole different campaign, which this study with this map has is talking about. Two totally different things. Totally different.
What was that one, Miss Margaret? Do you
Can
recall?
you tell us?
That was a art
Right.
proposed, and they did take some data, but we have not been able to have at least I wasn't participating in updating the information.
I can add to it that was essentially an exploratorium, kind of an art project demonstrating technology, but they had bells attached to it. So when the levels were certain ways, the bells would ring, and it
That's
was
true. Yes.
it was basically the idea was to connect people to the environment with that audible feedback loop, right? It wasn't ever intended really as a research tool. There are a bunch of
Thank
other
you.
monitors.
Understood.
Yeah, a bunch of other monitors have been put out. We did 100 stationary monitors with UC Berkeley 6 years ago. And our partners at ACLMA continue to drive every quarter. And we expect to see some of that data coming out in the next couple of months. So lots of new data we'll be seeing that will kind of look like this, but it'll be more contemporary.
So Fern has put the mutual air air pollution art installation in the chat. Scott.
Hey, thanks, Randolph. And thank you, Maria. We, like Brian just mentioned, initially through the community air monitoring grant with AB 617 in 2018, I guess 2019, we started driving continuously in 2019 in West Oakland, and have actually been doing that ever since. So we're in the process now of analyzing that huge data set and are going to be releasing this public portal in the next, probably in about a month. And had a great meeting the other day with a few folks on this call right now to start discussing like what deep dive analyses our scientists can do on the data set that would be most helpful to different groups working on the WOCAP implementation. And so we, and Ms. Margaret actually recommended that the next meeting that we have should be with the health committee. So we're really excited to do that. And I'm working with Ms. Margaret right now on getting that scheduled, potentially for the next time that you all come together as a group. Hopefully that will work for the majority of the group. And if not, we can have like, separate one-off meetings to get your input on what issues we should look at in particular in which parts of the neighborhood. And then the public tool that everybody will have access to will allow people to do address lookups and see how conditions have changed over time over those past few years that we've been monitoring there. So really looking forward to finally getting this data out, and appreciate y'all's patience on it. It's just, it's a lot. We've been collecting a ton of data there, but really happy to have it finally coming out.
Thanks, Scott. Rita.
Are you continuing to monitor, or are you done? Was there an end date?
No, we're continuing to monitor. So we also put out a small network of stationary devices. I think there were 7 until one got stolen, and there were 6. And those stationary devices sometimes lose connectivity. And so it's not the greatest data set, but we'll be including that as well. But the stationary for the most part is done, but the mobile monitoring is continuing.
Great. And before I get to you, Charles, Ms. Margaret.
Oh yeah, I would like to add that doing this mobile monitoring overlays with the actual modeling that the Air District does under AB 617. So with this new updated data that we have, we do need to refine it in such a way that the community residents can clearly understand it block by block. And so I would ask Wanda, what is your interest? What is the interest of the Hoover Foster neighborhood based on these findings to support something in Hoover Foster?
That was a question.
To Wanda.
Hey, Wanda.
Hold on. Sorry. I took a call. I missed it.
Wanda, I'm asking you, what is the interest of Hoover Foster and relationship to having this hyper local data block by block and the overlay of the modeling that the Bay Area Air Quality has done.
Yes. My only interest organizationally would be
Sorry,
that
I'm working
our
on it.
organization is growing gardens at both Prescott Elementary and Hoover Elementary. And we have been told that we're in the significant running for an opportunity of that to get that grant that funds community and intergenerational field trips that are related to the environment. And one of the things we wrote into that was most of that is directed directly at the Prescott neighborhood, primarily beginning through the elementary school and then expanding that into community-wide trips for both the kids and the elders and the experts, setting up a stage so that the experts can educate the community about these environmental things and all of that. So I just thought, I was just checking to see if we had the same data, because it would be valuable to our work, our being Common Vision's work in West Oakland generally, and then additionally the Prescott neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. Getting tired of standing.
Yeah. And they just gave me this machine and nobody really explained what it was for. So I thought I had finally
What was
discovered
that?
the answer. Sorry?
Why don't we, Wanda, why don't we connect, if you have a machine and you're not sure what it's for and you want to talk about that, why don't we connect offline and
For
and
sure.
see what that
Didn't
is,
mean
and
to
we'll
hold
talk
up
about it.
the meeting at all with that. I understand
Sure,
what it was
yeah.
for now.
But I would say that these data sets that are going to be available to us in the near future will be an excellent way to look at what's going on at any block in the community, and to be able to see on average, you know, we're growing gardens. Should we do something special
Right.
with the stuff? Should we wash it a special way? Should we do something right? That's really the point of it. And what we're hoping is that people look at the data and they draw new insights that we haven't thought about.
Uh-huh.
That's the whole point of it, right?
Sure. So let me just add then, we just got notification that we've received, we again, Common Vision, have received funding to do community engagement for the Department of Trees. Remember when David Moore came? It's when I first met all of you, right? And
Yes.
that Davy Foundation community survey they have to do. We
Yeah.
are one of the organizations that has been selected to do that work. And we intend to send our youth out this summer into West Oakland specifically to ask folks what they want. So any kind of data like this that you can add to the way in which we train our youth to talk to people about this, the better.
Okay, that's what the data's for. We need to look at it and figure out how to use it, and how to integrate, you know, as the purpose of this presentation. How do we keep tying equity and EJ into that conversation with the community as we share greater knowledge with them, right? That's
Yeah.
always the goal here. Share knowledge so that they can use that knowledge for whatever purpose they think is important, right?
Correct. And what we intend to do is put the experts and the elders together with the youth, translate it all for everybody, hands in soil as a way to do that, and then plant trees and whatever else is indicated from that engagement.
Okay.
And Charles Reed, I'm gonna say to you again, workforce development, we're ready.
Let's hear from Charles. We've got just about 15 minutes in this section. Charles.
Yeah, that was a great transition right there, Wanda. Because I'm always thinking about workforce development. And
You never call me back though. I'm just saying.
Hey, I apologize.
Got a broke neck. I know.
Hey, I'm still working though.
All right, let's do it.
So I will follow up. I promise you that. And Scott, one of the things I thought I heard you say, and I might have been wrong. You can correct me if I was. Is that there was opportunity for us to help give you ideas of where to go and what places to drive around and things of that nature. We can, is that right, that we can give suggestions in that fashion?
Yeah, well, luckily we've been driving everywhere in West Oakland now for a few years, so we don't have to worry about where to go, but what specifically to look at, because it's a relatively small area, but it's still a pretty big area, and it's a lot of data. So if you could provide recommendations on specific parts of the neighborhood, where there might be like sensitive populations that you're particularly interested in, or possible polluters of interest, things like that. Yeah, we would love to have a conversation with you, and you're definitely on our list of people to reach out to. Anybody, everybody. I'll put my email here in the chat. But whoever wants to provide specific input, please send it over, and we can also set up meetings if that's better for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll take that information down.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, Scott.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Another great thing I will just toss in here is that since the beginning, the Aclima drivers have been people from the community. So they've done I think they've done a commendable job. They always send us a notice, we need a new driver. We put it out onto our networks. I spoke with one of their drivers just about a month and a half ago when they brought the car over to the Civic Corps school, and the guy was really cool. He was like a 45-year-old African-American man, and he was like, this is great. I used to have a different kind of job, but I really enjoy learning about the science, and I like driving. So there are good jobs within this work, and then there's going to be more jobs. As Wanda's talking about, who plants trees, who takes care of trees. There are multiple grants now, funding that we've received and the city's received that includes something called stewardship. We have to figure out what that really means, and how much people can do, and liability, all these things. But we're moving in the right direction to try to get some folks working. So
Maria, you asked for a couple of questions and see what you got. We're gonna hand it back to you.
Okay, sorry, I lost the
of-
mute button there.
It's a lot of energy, a lot of good
Yeah,
energy.
yeah. Well, I'll maybe move through a couple more of these explanations of data types, and then take some more questions. But the second one that we've talked about in the past with the steering committee is health impact assessments. And health impact assessments are really a sort of tool for asking what impact air pollution concentrations are having on health, using data that is based on lots of studies in other places to evaluate the relationship between air pollution and health, and then applying that to estimates of air pollution to say, since we know the air pollution is this level, what do we expect the impact to health to be? So it's an estimate. It's not a study that looks at individuals and tracks their health over time. But some examples of that are the Bay Area Health Risk Assessment that was conducted using the mobile data to look at, based on that mobile data, what we would expect mortality impacts and pediatric asthma impacts to be in West Oakland. An assessment that the Air District conducted on the cancer risk associated with diesel particulate matter, that saw West Oakland was a hotspot for cancer risk from diesel particulate matter when that study was conducted. So the types of questions these types of data can answer are how many deaths and childhood asthma cases in West Oakland are estimated to result from air pollution each year, and what would be the expected change in this impact if pollution was reduced to a certain level. Another type of health data are health indicators, and these are rather than estimates of what we think the impact of air pollution would be, these are actually sort of tracking health over time, tracking the real health of populations in West Oakland. An example of this type of data is the Alameda Public Health Department community health dashboards, which have a lot of different indicators, including emergency department visits due to asthma, hospitalization due to asthma, infant mortality. Those are all available at the zip code level, so don't have a lot of variability within West Oakland. But there's other data, including death data, mortality data that the public health department has that's available at finer scale, so census block group scale, which is just sort of a few block area. Cal EnviroScreen, which is a tool developed by the state, has some health indicators available in it at the census tract level. And those include asthma emergency department visits, cardiovascular emergency department visits, and the percentage of births of infants that are born at a low birth weight. So the types of questions these data can answer are what was the rate of emergency department visits for asthma in the 94607 zip code in 2012 to 2014, and how does that rate compare to other Alameda County zip codes? And you can see that that's a range of 3 years. This type of data, in addition to not being always available at very fine geographic sort of neighborhood scales, also often is published for sort of an average across multiple years in order to have some stability in the data and less sort of ups and downs, to try to be truly representative of patterns. But that means, and we'll spend a little bit more time talking about this, but that means it's tough to see quick changes in this data, in part because there's a delay in when it is reported. Right now, 2012 to 2014 is the most recent data that's available for ED visits for asthma on the dashboard, and in part because it takes several years to get an average. So are there any questions about either of these types of health data? If not, I can keep going, and then we can have sort of more combined discussion at the end.
Please.
Yeah. So the last type of data that is available are indicators of vulnerability, and Marjane already spoke through these sort of types of vulnerability indicators or social determinants of health. Some that are available in California include Cal EnviroScreen and the US EPA EJ screen. And as an example, US EPA EJ screen, which is an image here, has what's called a demographic index that they publish at census tract level, which has a number of different components, including the percentage of that tract that's identified as people of color, the percentage that's identified as low income in relation to the poverty level, unemployment rates, linguistic isolation, or not having access to information in your dominant language, education levels, and then percentage of the population under age 5 or over age 64. So those are all examples of vulnerability. And in the context of air pollution, there's a lot of evidence that these types of vulnerabilities can make people more susceptible to the health burden of exposure to air pollution. So example questions that these type of data can answer are, what are the characteristics of the residents of a neighborhood where a particular implementation project might take place? And where are the most vulnerable neighborhoods in West Oakland that should be prioritized for air pollution interventions, where we might expect to see the largest benefits? So I think I referred to a couple of these limitations and things to keep in mind with this data as I was talking through the health indicators, but some of the really important constraints are that a lot of these health indicators in particular are often not available at the address or neighborhood level. There's a delay in when those data become available, and there's also issues with sample size. Some things like low birth weight, for example, are quite rare, which means in order to get sort of a stable estimate over time, you need to average either over a larger area, a larger number of years, or both. So, and other challenges to making the types of causal connections between particular interventions and health, which is often what we really want to be able to do, to say what will the impact of this action be on health, is that a lot of the diseases that air pollution causes take time to develop. Cancer is an example where it can take years or decades after an exposure for that disease to show up, and so that can make relating those things in time very, very challenging. And also other factors influencing health. So you sometimes hear these referred to as confounding factors, but other things that are related to both air pollution and health that make it challenging to really isolate the connection between air pollution and health in research. So I'm happy to take couple questions there. I know we're meant to wrap up in the next couple minutes, and we wanted to share a few just thoughts on proposed activities for the HVAC moving forward. So maybe we'll just shift to that and then take questions at the end on both points. Kelsey.
That works. Thanks, Maria. So we had a meeting and received feedback from the Health Equity Advisory Committee on how they would like to proceed moving forward. And the proposal is that full HEAC meetings would occur every 3 to 4 months and would include getting briefed on updates for how WOCAP implementation projects are going, give them the lay of the land and understand what things are developing. Likewise, there would be regular updates going back to the steering committee on the activities of the HEAC, as well as ongoing support for WOCAP implementation projects as requested. And the initial request is being proposed through the steering committee proposed questions and request forms. So during those initial questions that each project needs to fill out, they can request and include any questions for technical assistance, and then the HEAC can engage with them on that. So the leads of the HEAC would identify members with relevant expertise, connect them, and then allow them to then directly work with the implementation project teams to try and develop solutions or further questions as they see fit. And the last proposal is potential for creating new working groups or ad hoc groups, which on the next slide, some examples of this are, there could be a work group that would be pushing for data access advocacy. For example, Maria had just spoken about how data is not necessarily available at the address level and is frequently at the zip code level. So pushing for finer resolution data that's more readily linked to individual locations. The research groups that could be proposed could share relevant data and research, potentially conduct new research, but most importantly, give updates and report back to the steering committee on new studies and relevant things that are coming out that could be potentially relevant to the implementation groups themselves, as well as ad hoc groups. So refining the impact zones, or a public and clinical education group to work on improving community awareness and understanding of these issues. Do we want to proceed to discussion, Maria?
Yeah. And I think something to just sort of emphasize is, particularly for these WOCAP ad hoc groups, that would be sort of something we would be open to if it's something that the steering committee thinks is worthwhile and makes sense to proceed with. And that's really true of all of these proposals. So that's what we were hoping to seek feedback on tonight, and through sort of additional feedback mechanisms moving forward.
Do we have any thoughts from our steering committee members? Well, that was a fantastic presentation. You answered all the questions. Anyone? Any takers? Any takers?
Hey, this is Brent calling in. Oh,
Okay.
go ahead. Sorry.
Brent?
No, someone else was just about to speak. Let them go.
Oh, this was me, Rita. I kind of hear what you're saying. You're not sure how to go about using this data to and where to go and how to approach. And I mean, for me right now, I just have no idea what this data can do for us, you know, and what, and so you're asking right now, you don't really have a plan. Is that what you're saying? Or do you have some ideas on where you can take this data and what impact it can have with which groups, or what you're hoping to do with it? I don't know. And you're asking for our opinions on what to do with this data?
I think what we're looking for, sort of similar to the question that Scott was posing, are the specific questions that implementation projects, it could be the steering committee as a whole, but I think particularly sort of questions that folks are running into in implementation of the WOCAP strategies. And then once those questions are framed, then all of the folks who have been participating in this committee can sort of think about all the different data sources that are available and which data sources could best be used to inform those questions, or if there aren't any data sources that are appropriate, if additional data is needed, additional research is needed. But is that?
Yeah, and in a moment we're going to hear from Alberti and then Charles, but I think the goal is as the work proceeds in parallel with the HEAC and the implementation projects, is that there will be a point where they come together and the HEAC informs the work of the implementation projects. But because they are not, kind of fully formed and launched, I don't think we're at that point yet, but I do think it'll be a good kind of symbiotic relationship between the Health Equity Advisory Committee and the implementation project.
So I think we just want to make sure the community is in the driver's seat. We don't want to come in a bunch of scientists and saying this is what we have to do. We are just we are at the service of the steering committee. It's not, we don't have projects we want to force on the steering committee.
Mm-hmm. Great. And we've got about 5 more minutes in this section, just as a time check. Albertia and then Charles.
Thank you. I do have a question. We discussed in a few meetings back about the implementation of getting air purifiers placed and to, I guess, collect the data and follow up. Has that project been implemented yet? That's my question.
Ms. Margaret or Brian or others who are
Can I answer the
involved
question?
in?
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Please do.
In October of last year, we partnered with the West Oakland Health Council to deploy indoor filters to their clients. So yes, we have deployed indoor air monitors to people of West Oakland that are patients of the West Oakland Health Council. Now,
So Miss Margaret, there's a really important learning moment here. And I that's the only reason I'm interrupting you. I've already used the word air filters, use the word air monitors.
Okay, let's clarify. Yeah, okay. Clarify, yeah. Air filters, as you said, would mean that we would have to have an electrical person go inside.
No, that's not it, Margaret. The difference between a filter and a monitor is what's important here. Air filters filter the air. They don't collect any data. No one follows up.
Okay.
There's nothing to follow up. Air monitors don't filter the air. They don't clean the air. They collect data about the air, and then that can be followed up on. It's really important we start to clarify our language here so that folks understand what's what. This is part of the science that we work with, right?
Okay, so Alberta, which one of these informations are you asking about?
Actually, both, because I thought there was equipment to go in, and the people that were selected to use the equipment, and then we did follow-ups to see if it made a difference having that air filtering system in their homes.
No, that's incorrect.
And that was a follow-up to collect the data. So
okay, but let's, for clarification, we never, maybe there's some miscommunication here. We never put air monitors inside people's houses. All the portable air monitors or sensors was outside people's houses.
Yeah, there's a link here. There was a program with the Air District, and we worked with them to get the West Oakland Health Council to identify families who had high incidence of asthma, and then to give those families indoor air filters. Now, there was no formalized plan to follow up and ask those families if things were better, if their health was better. That's something we would hope that the Health Council would be tracking. But it's a really important question.
Right.
And it's one of those questions that, I'm glad you're lifting it up, because tracking progress is important. But as you've heard in this presentation on data, it's very hard to track progress. It has to be highly specific, almost highly personal. This would be a good program for the Health Council to be tracking whether those families are seeing reductions in asthma incidents based on having indoor filtration. That would be very important to know, but we don't at this moment have. At this moment, there's not some agreement to track and share that data.
Okay, that's what you're addressing. What I was speaking to. Thank you for clearing it up for me. Thank you. So I guess being part of the health component, maybe that's something to be discussed.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that Maria has time to complete her presentation, but we want to hear from Charles. Do you have a comment on this item, Charles?
Let Maria take care of what she have to do first, because we don't want to be cheating nobody.
Okay,
And
great.
we're at the end. Randolph, we're happy to take additional questions, or if the
Okay.
agenda needs to
So
move
we're gonna
on.
have,
Yeah.
thank you. That's great. It's so much information that we have to process it, and I hope that we can kind of come together and get all these questions answered. Charles, do you have something? And then we're gonna move to the implementation reports.
Yeah,
We're gonna thank Maria and the team, and then we're gonna move.
thank you for giving me that time back, Maria. Because one of the things I wanted to say, and Ms. Wanda, is that I see how this data can be used for workforce development in so many different ways. And so I'm really looking forward to us being able to brainstorm on specifically how we can make that data so relevant that it actually employs people and helps people helps people better their quality of life through employment. And so I don't never want you to think that it's just data floating around and don't nobody know what to do with it. It's a bunch of people here on this team that is very creative with how to serve the community and give back to the community, especially since you put forth that work. So thank you. And Ms. Wanda, I will be speaking to you about it, because when I heard it, I was just like, sparks start popping. So thank you guys.
Awesome, thank you. So Maria, Marjane, Kelsey, you want to close us out?
Sure, yeah. I did just want to remind folks that in this appendix that we distributed, there's an overview of more data sources in each of these categories with links to each of them, both for currently available data and then potential additional data sources. And we also have selected slides from the meetings to date, and are happy to answer any questions about those by email.
Awesome, thanks so much. Snaps, claps. We can tell just how much kind of work you all have put into this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move the agenda, and we've got a couple of implementation project report backs. Let's see here. The first is going to be Shayna Hirschfeld Gold. Shayna, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, great. I think we're good. And so you have co-hosting, but Beth also, and are you gonna?
I think Beth was going to show.
Well, Randolph, you're sharing your screen, so
Yeah.
Okay.
flipping the slides. Oh, Shayna, did you? Okay, I can share if you want. Shayna, did you want? Let me get it open. Hold on.
I think that would be
Okay, I have.
slightly easier for me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I have it right here.
Okay, well, I can start with intros. My name is Shayna Hirschfield Gold. I'm the climate coordinator for the city of Oakland. On the city's sustainability team, I have been with the city of Oakland for 8 years now. I think I just passed my 8-year mark. And one of the many things that I've been very privileged to work on was the development of the Equitable Climate Action Plan. You see the cover there in front of you. Miss Margaret and Brian were both on the community advisory committee for this plan. And it was an amazing and challenging 2+ year process. This is a plan that gets us to 2030 in terms of our the city's climate equity targets and goals. So it targets a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. But more importantly, it does that through a lens of increasing justice and equity across Oakland. So one of the major focus areas within this plan is on electrification. So if you could go to the next slide, Beth. So I wanted to start out here with, what do I mean by equitable electrification, by electrification on its own? And so at its most simple, electrification means replacing gas appliances in our buildings with efficient electric alternatives, and doing that for the sake of everyone's health, safety, and justice. I'm gonna come back to what I mean by justice several times, but at the most general, I'm talking about energy security. I'm talking about housing security. I'm talking about, can we afford to live the way we all deserve to live, including things like jobs, good jobs, high road jobs. So from a technical side, and I want to say that I spoke with Miss Margaret earlier, and we talked about how great it would be to have kind of an electrification 101 seminar for the community. And I promised that I would deliver that. So this is something that I could do in 30 minutes or an hour. I'm going to try to do it right now in 2 minutes. So because that's what we have on the agenda. And I apologize. I am happy to answer questions afterwards. So when we're talking about our buildings, the energy that's used in our buildings, we're talking about electricity, and we're talking about methane gas. Now, most of us refer to that as natural gas. That is a term that the gas industry got everybody to use to make it sound soft and fuzzy. But make no mistake about it, methane gas is toxic, it is flammable, and it is explosive. Probably most of you remember the San Bruno explosion a little over 10 years ago now that killed, I think it was 8 people. And that in the upper corner there, you see an explosion that happened in 2017 in San Francisco. This is not a clean, pretty fuel, and it is definitely not a bridge to a fossil fuel free future. Especially here in the Bay Area, where we are earthquake prone. We do not need more sources of fires and explosions. So that is one reason, but also gas is very bad for our health. I'll go into that more in a minute, but the mechanics of how do we go about switching our buildings from ones that use a combination of gas and electricity to ones that only use electricity. The major appliances that we're talking about are heating. So that's our furnaces, water heating. There's a picture of a properly strapped water heater there in the bottom corner. Cooking from, many people have gas stoves. And then some people have gas dryers. So really it's 4 appliances that we're talking about in our homes. Energy efficiency is a huge, huge part of this. If you go from a gas furnace to some kind of electric alternative, and you're in one of the many Oakland homes that has no insulation or, has air leaks all over the place, if there's, mold or rodents in the ductwork, if the ducts are leaky, you're going to have big, big, big problems. You're actually going to compound your problems. And by the way, you're going to have incredibly high bills. So the urgency here is not to do this fast only, because of the climate crisis, we do need to go as fast as we can, but it's about doing it right, doing it holistically, not doing it in a piecemeal way. And so back to justice, talking about, can we use solar to offset people's costs? Can we use energy storage like batteries to make sure that when there are power outages, people who are reliant on energy to keep their food cold, to keep their medicines cold, to keep their bodies warm, are not going to be in a difficult situation. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with programs like, for example, the Alameda County Healthy Homes Program. You know, many of you probably know that there is a big lead settlement. There's lots of lead in Oakland. There are lots of us dealing with asthma and things like that related to poor outdoor air quality. So how do we deal with all of this in a coordinated, holistic approach so that we're not missing opportunities and we're not, you know, driving up bills, as I mentioned. So we can go on to the next slide there. So I'll go through this very quickly. I mentioned health a couple of times, and I'll just say here, there's a lot of data that has come out in the last 5 or so years about what we are really doing to our lungs when we are burning methane gas in our homes. Children who grow up in homes with gas stoves are 40% more likely to get asthma. Now, here, this is a group of folks who are, you know, really thinking about air quality. The air quality that we're often talking about around the port is outdoor air that, yes, comes into our home, but we're talking about pollution from outdoor sources. Well, you don't want to also be creating just as much pollution indoors. Gas stoves by themselves, not even talking about furnaces and water heaters, also create NOx, nitrous oxides, which in many cases have been measured at to be higher than levels that the EPA would consider legal if it were outside. Unfortunately, the EPA does not regulate indoor air quality. So this is really a huge health issue that, you know, we need to be focusing on first and foremost in the communities that are already disproportionately burdened by poor outdoor air quality. I talked about safety and resilience in terms of fires, explosions, needing backup power. There's been some really incredible research also in the last few years showing that if we transition all buildings in California to electricity only, there will be an increase in jobs. Now, within that, there is going to be there are going to be some changes, and if we're not careful, it can be very uncomfortable for some folks. You know, who's working at the gas stations, who is changing the fuel pump or the oil, the filters in your cars. You know, who is fixing the gas pipelines in the streets. We need to really attend to that. And that's something that we have been talking with a number of our colleagues in Oakland and around the state about. So we're trying to kind of, like I said, really deal with this holistically. I mentioned this is a climate issue. Methane is more than 80 times stronger than carbon dioxide in terms of a greenhouse gas, in terms of how fast it warms the planet. So there is absolute consensus that if we are going to be successful in beating the climate crisis, we have to get rid of gas so that we have time to deal with all of the other issues. So yeah, there's a huge technology imperative. And City Council has said that we need to electrify all buildings by 2040. So that is adopted policy now by the City Council. And the question is how we're going to get there. The good news is that we have the technologies now. I mentioned kind of the big four: space heating, water heating, cooking, clothes drying. There are efficient electric alternatives for all of those available on the market, many, many different models available right now. We can go to the next slide. The challenges are that even though we have you know, many options available, not all contractors are, you know, trained in this stuff. Even those who are aware of what products and appliances are out there don't always understand how they all work together. It's not enough to just change a gas furnace for an electric one. It comes with these different technologies come with very different assumptions. And there are a lot of other changes. Like I mentioned, you know, insulating your home is going to be critical to keep bills down. That's one of many, many examples. As I mentioned, I could take an hour to talk about the technology here. So it's a little tricky to go through it quickly, but there are a lot of challenges that go along with this stuff. Cost is huge. This is something that Brian and I have talked about a lot. We've got a lot of older houses in Oakland. If you're dealing with lath and plaster, knob and tube wiring, limited electric service, a small electric panel, by the way, God forbid, you also, need to do seismic upgrades and, other things. We don't want to make folks have to make these really tough decisions after scaring them about the health impacts of gas. We don't want to waste opportunities when one agency goes into a home to address mold or asbestos, and then we say, oh, well, we want to talk to you also about this. We need to be very intentional and very, again, coordinated with this approach. Labor readiness is huge, and we have to be very upfront about what sectors are vulnerable. Affordable housing and restaurants are probably two of the most vulnerable areas as we think about making such a drastic change in our built environment. So if council said we have to do this by 2040, it's not like it's not like anybody's going to be going into everybody's homes and buildings in the next 3 years and saying you have to make all of these changes. I would imagine that some buildings are going to change sooner, and some are going to change much, much later toward the end of that 18-year period. And how do we figure out which buildings, which customers, which sectors those are? And how do we make sure that those who are transitioning later aren't experiencing other harms by continuing to stay on gas or being the last ones left to be paying for the gas infrastructure? Okay, so let's move on to kind of some more hopeful things. First of all, we have a very clean electric grid. I just want to answer a question that I get asked a lot. A lot of people say, well, natural gas is burned for the electricity that we get. Well, it's basically not true at this point. Thanks to East Bay Community Energy, we have a very clean electric grid. And by 2030, it's going to be 100% renewable and carbon free. So transitioning our buildings and our vehicles to run on that electricity is really contributing to a very virtuous cycle. East Bay Community Energy, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, and even the state are now starting to put more and more funds into electrification programs. There are many, many rebates and incentives. I think somebody added up the rebates and incentives that are available right now, and it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not going to give you an exact number because it seems to change all the time. But I know that East Bay Community Energy right now has an opportunity for small restaurants to receive over $17,000 to electrify their cooking and electrical and materials. And anyways, in commercial restaurants. There's a lot going on in the workforce development arena. Cypress Mandela, West Oakland Jobs Resource Center, all these folks are, really paying attention to this transition. And I would say also that there's a huge focus on resilience these days, as you all know, and that is another huge opportunity as we start looking at how do we build resilient communities, and bringing in an awareness that needs to mean we're breathing well outside and inside. We have respite from, smoke and from heat in buildings that can keep the power on when the lights elsewhere go out. Let's move on to the next slide. So just a quick note on the timeline. The city already said that all new construction has to be all electric. So the focus now is solely on existing buildings. And I'm just gonna kind of skip ahead to the end of this. City staff, which is my team basically, is on the hook to bring a roadmap back to council a little over a year from now, showing how we're going to get from here to 2040. What are the specific policy steps that we're going to take? And in developing a policy roadmap like this, we really need to start with the most affected communities. So, you know, like I said, starting with environmental justice communities, starting with communities that are already disproportionately burdened with outdoor air quality, poor outdoor air quality, like West Oakland. That's why I'm here talking to you all, because, you know, hearing from community members in West Oakland is going to be critical to making this a plan that works for everybody. And this is where I need your help. I need to know who needs to be at the table, who do we need to invite to these conversations about how to develop policies around this, and how do we get those people to the table. When I say the policy process, I'm talking about everything from what we should be advocating for, how do we protect the most vulnerable communities, sectors, residents, when should we start implementing various requirements like mandatory retrofits in certain types of buildings, what kinds of exemptions do we need to consider, what kinds of supports are needed, and specifically for who. You know, we're looking at an 18-year transition now. It's going to be complicated. There are going to be a lot of strategies coming into this. So my plea to all of you is to, you know, to help me and my team in engaging the West Oakland community in developing the policy roadmap for equitable electrification. I mentioned that, you know, I am ready and willing to bring electrification 101 workshops to the West Oakland community. How should I structure those? How should I, you know, get the word out? How should we get people to them? But, you know, it's not just about educating people. It's also about engaging people in the policy process. So I'm actually going to stop there. You can land on the last slide because it's got my contact info, but I know that we're already over time. So I'd love to.
Oh, and Shayna, can you, just as a best practice, can you please remind us which strategy numbers from the WOCAP this relates to? I can.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm trying to, where did I jotted this down. It was definitely 17, because strategy 17 specifically looks at electrification, but also 25 and 86 were also, you know, are also very much related to this. So 86 was, you know, looking at the Alameda County Public Health Department, at looking at green building approaches and such. So electrification is absolutely part of green building. And I can never remember, what is 25? Yeah, local pollution exposure, working with community groups around gentrification. I want to name that, you know, when you go in to buildings and you quote unquote improve buildings, make them safer, make them healthier, bring them up to date, you can definitely put gentrification pressures on a community. And I am very aware that West Oakland is facing a lot of gentrification pressure. Nobody wants to add to that. So, you know, that's another, you know, reason to really do this planning process together to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences.
Great, thank you.
That's great. And I just wanna say we may go a little bit over because we don't want to shortchange Alicia, but are you ready to take a couple of questions?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, just needed to turn on the light. And since we're over time, I'm absolutely happy to take questions over email or to come back. I'm usually at these meetings.
Yeah, and Joshua said, thank you for naming that, because a lot of times when we're doing these things, there are some unintended consequences. So planning for that ahead of time is always good. So thank you for that. David?
Hey, that was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. And I'm wondering if you have any reactions to what the California Public Utility Commission is doing in its various proceedings about decommissioning gas distribution systems and support for consumers making this switch. I know that's a big topic, but maybe just a quick, your sense of whether they're headed in the right direction or not.
Oof, yeah, that is a massive topic. I think that generally they're somewhat headed in the right direction, but the pace at which it is going is bad. I'll just say, I could use a lot of adjectives. One of the biggest things that stands in our way is the cost of electricity. Just that, electric rates are high, and electric rates are high relative to gas. They're both going up over time, and gas rates are going up faster than electric rates are going up. And all projections show that that's going to continue and probably accelerate. But it's going to even be a while before they hit parity. So, I think one of the biggest things that I harp on every time I talk to somebody at the Public Utilities Commission or anyone in state government is we need utility rate reform, and we need it now. So a huge area of needed advocacy. Definitely the PUC, the utilities and others are talking about gas line decommissioning. East Bay Community Energy is actually doing a study right now looking at the potentials for gas line decommissioning. But that itself is a huge undertaking, because when you look at decommissioning gas lines, who and what buildings and what activities are along those lines? How do you prepare buildings for eventually decommissioning? How do you decide what is going to be decommissioned first? There are so many subjective calls there, and so many resources are called for. So yeah, these are huge topics, but again, these are topics that I would love for normal people in the community to be engaged in these conversations. Because right now, I think everybody uses the excuse of it's way too complicated, and you don't have residents very much involved in these conversations. And I would love to see that change in Oakland.
Great job, Shana.
Thank you, David.
That's awesome. So thanks so much. You see from the screen, you got some claps there. And maybe you could connect offline. There was another question there about consideration for supporting rooftop solar in EJ communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's something even that you can reply to in the chat, so we have it for this group. So thank you again, Shana. We're going to move to Alicia. Alicia, you want to take the screen? Actually, you can switch you and there we go.
I don't think we even need a screen. I'll just let
No?
you see Alicia's face because there's no
Oh, okay.
slide.
So we've got Alicia Parker from the city of Oakland and Miss Margaret are going to co-present this this section.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Alicia Parker with the Oakland Planning Department. I have a couple of slides. Is it okay if I screen share?
Please do.
Sure.
Our Randolph is Alicia co-host.
She is.
Great.
Okay, great. So again, thank you very much for having me tonight. And we're, we have an update on the implementation of the West Oakland Truck Management Plan. And I wanted to just, if anyone wasn't familiar with the boundaries and sort of the extent of where the plan applies, I wanted to give you an aerial photo. So the former Oakland Army base is sort of in this top of the screen, and it's outlined in yellow. And so as part of the redevelopment of the former Oakland Army base into logistics, warehousing and transportation and other uses, truck impacts were identified as part of the environmental review. And so the truck management plan was developed as a strategy to address truck impacts, specifically to reduce the impacts of large heavy duty trucks in the neighborhood of West Oakland. I also want to mention that I am a co-project manager with the Port of Oakland. And so we've been working over the last couple of years on implementing some of the initial strategies of the truck management plan. Just advance the slide. Okay, so I'm just going to try to eliminate some stuff on my screen so I can see more. Okay, there we go, I think. So I only have a few slides, so I just wanted to kind of give you a timeline of where we've been. So in 2019, the truck management plan was approved again to reduce the impacts of transport trucks in West Oakland. And after the plan was approved, the consultant team began refining the proposals, specifically related to truck parking and to truck routes. And then we had a community engagement effort. So not only was there a community engagement effort, a very robust one, to prepare the truck management plan, there has also been a community engagement effort to implement the truck management plan. And what we heard during that community engagement effort was that there was some real serious contention around frontage road. And I'll get into that. This is just a sort of overview. And then we prepared a study to look at frontage road specifically and engage with the community again. And so at this time, at this stage of the process, we are currently in the city council adoption process. And so we have started by going to the Public Works Committee, which is a subcommittee of city council. We've been to city council once in March, and we'll be going back on April 19th with the second reading of the truck parking update to the municipal code. And then we'll be back on May 17th for the update to the truck routes. And then after that, the implementation work, so the new signage will take place for the truck parking and the truck routes. And I would just mention here that these actions are also included in the West Oakland Community Action Plan. So Strategy 38 includes changes to the truck parking regulations, and Strategy 39 includes updates to the truck routes and a network of truck prohibited streets. Okay, so let me just advance the slide. Okay, so this is a map of West Oakland, and the green areas are parks, and then the lines, the purple lines and blue lines indicate areas where truck parking would be allowed come April 19th, when the new rules are applied. And so essentially, we're going to prohibit truck parking throughout West Oakland unless there is a sign that allows truck parking. And so this is going to tremendously clarify enforcement and reduce the amount of truck parking available in the neighborhood. And the other parking related proposal is to prohibit unattached trailers from parking citywide. And so those are the trailers that are attached to the cabs of the large heavy duty trucks. The next proposal that we have was identified in the truck management plan, and we have been working to implement, was the update to the truck route network and the truck prohibited streets. And so this is a map that shows the truck prohibited streets and the truck routes. So the colors on the map are basically the zoning designation. So there's yellow corresponds to residential zoning. The orange corresponds to commercial zoning, which also permits residential, and then purple is industrial zoning. And so the changes were to add a truck prohibited designation on 28th Street because it's more residential in nature to the north of 28th Street. Similarly, adding a truck prohibited designation on Eddy Street, and a few other changes around the entrances to the freeway. The most controversial truck route change was to label frontage road as a truck route. And so the blue lines are truck routes and the red lines are the truck prohibited streets. So as I said, we were responsive to community, we being the City of Oakland, Department of Transportation, Planning Department, and the Port of Oakland. And so we prepared a frontage road study. And the study looked at different scenarios and what would happen if we either ban trucks on frontage road, and this is frontage road, or if we formalized frontage road as a truck route. And what we found was that if we banned trucks on frontage road, that they would divert into the neighborhood. So they would divert onto Mandela Parkway, they would divert onto Adeline Street, and they would divert into Market Street. Okay. So with that, sort of information, the recommendation is to formalize frontage road as a truck route, and importantly, it's paired with future improvements that will be led by the port. So the port and city have a memorandum of understanding stating that the port will lead a community process to redesign frontage road so that it functions more safely, so that it addresses air quality, and so that it is more sort of conducive to the residential units that are nearby. And the important thing to note about the port leading this effort is that it would not be subject to the city's capital improvement program. That is the method to deliver street improvements normally. And frontage road did not score very high on the capital improvement program. So that is the recommendation. The other thing I wanted to add is that we went, like I said, we went to council on, I think I'll just go ahead and stop sharing screen and we can kind of see each other a little more. Do that in a, okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we heard from community pretty clearly about wanting to make sure that the process was very inclusive in terms of having the right parties at the table, wanting to have a seat at the table. And so the port has since retained Serlene Grant with EnviroCom, and she will be reaching out to various stakeholders and sort of asking and figuring out what a good plan for community engagement would be for the future redesign project. We will be also adding some of those commitments into the resolution that will accompany the truck route designation so that there's more kind of ability to really hold these agencies accountable. So the Port of Oakland and the City of Oakland. And then in response to sort of the scope of the future frontage road redesign project, again, we'll be including in this resolution that the scope would include a health equity assessment, that the construction drawings would address safety, health, traffic calming measures, and that we want to get this to a level of design such that it's ready for grant proposal, and that even having grant support as part of the request for proposals, and that the community would actually be involved in sort of deciding on the request for proposals. And then the other thing related to accountability is that we would add that we would return to council with annual updates. So that is the presentation, or the update rather. I'm happy to answer questions.
Brian? And thanks, Alicia. I'm sorry. I should have said that first. Thanks so much.
Sure. And also Laura Ariola is also on the call to help answer questions. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Alicia, for that, concise briefing. It's all very clear. There's a lot of things we like about the truck management plan. I mean, many of the people on this call, many of us spent a couple of years working with city staff, Pat McGowan in particular, to pull that together. It was a really well done, in my opinion, it was a really well done public process. The concern that I have is that the Port Commission, who would ultimately be in charge of the staff activity that goes on relative to this, right? They're the equivalent of the city council in a sense, right? So the Port Commission has no legal mandate to protect the interests of the people of West Oakland. Contrary to, that's what our city council is for. And so it's concerning if the city sort of passes this over and says, oh, the port should do it. I know there's a cost sharing relationship. There's a bunch of relationships that exist there, but it feels like a handoff to people who don't really have to care about us. And that's very concerning. It's also concerning that we already had a process going with the port and I think your office and the city talking about the Prescott Greening Project was essentially looking at how do we reduce the emissions or protect the community from freeway and frontage road emissions. And suddenly the port's convening a group. And our experience is that when the port convenes a discussion group, it doesn't really matter much what the community says. The port winds up rolling down some path that they have inferred is the best path anyway. So it's very concerning that the port is now in charge of this. And I'm hoping that we can step back and revisit that decision so that, so that there's more of a community-driven process. I think our community, all of our community members are capable of understanding the data and capable of understanding if there are any trade-offs. I think they're capable of understanding them. Our project, which is one of our strategies, Prescott Greening Project, to study the impacts of the frontage road, has not even gotten off the ground yet. We've got money from MTC and a variety of sources, but we haven't been able to begin that research. And so I would hope that we can postpone this decision about this specific element of the truck plan until we have both sides of the discussion complete. When we've figured out how we mitigate the impacts of this decision, then I think people will be willing to go forward and say, yes, let's go forward and make that choice. It's very, it's not comfortable to say, yeah, we'll make that designation. And then, some subsequent administration will decide if we really want to study it. I think that's a key question that I've heard from many community members. And I hope that we can work collaboratively to figure out a solution to that.
Thoughts?
Thanks.
Alicia? If not, we're gonna go to to Charles and then Miss Margaret.
Well, it's, let's see.
I did this.
There could be a risk potentially of losing momentum and then ending up with status quo. If we wait. And I definitely appreciate the notion of understanding some of the tools, buffers and species and how that impacts reduction in emissions. So I think there is a risk though.
Is the risk that some kind of federal money won't be available to us, or this is what we've heard from the port. Unless we designate a truck route now, then we miss out on all tons of federal money that the port will get, basically, I guess. But we also hear that Caltrans is really interested. They have money. The infrastructure bill has lots of money in it. People are calling me up and saying, how can we spend money? Federal agencies are calling. So I don't want us to feel, I don't want the city or us to feel that we are, we have a gun to our heads and we have to do this a certain way, because the port just has not demonstrated itself to be a good actor all the time and many times. And that's concerning to us as a community. And so I think we need to have a more conversation about this before we move forward. I mean, I would encourage that the truck parking designations move forward, that the truck enforcement, the training for enforcement officers move forward. Many things in the truck plan can move forward, but this particular thing is highly controversial, and we don't have any consensus at all. In fact, we have people totally polarized between the folks who live along the frontage road and the folks who live in other neighborhoods that would see fewer trucks. And I don't want us to have a community that's polarized. I think we owe it to this community to bring everyone together in a kind of neutral space that's not driven by, we have to get some money, and allow people to get comfortable with this change.
Okay, now, Laura, did you have something in response to this before I get to Miss Margaret and David?
I do. Hi, everyone. Hi, Brian. Yeah, absolutely, everyone. I will just say that there's a lot of threads here, but one of the things is that should be crystal clear is that what the notion that the Prescott greening isn't in isolation of the truck management plan, number one. And so it's tied to the momentum of getting it done to the truck management plan. And so having been on it from inception, before even the city had a project manager on the truck management plan, when I was the lead to getting it all together, this is, again, as we all know, a commitment as both city and the port as part of the acquisition to the Army baselines. There is a lot of mitigations in place, ordinances in place, city and port ordinances in place. We cannot separate the Prescott grading from the West Oakland truck management plan, for that matter, the frontage road situation from the West Oakland truck management plan, and expect an outcome or expect a different outcome, or should I say, what's presented and drafted to go forward to city council. So all of that is all in one, and that is really because the West Oakland truck management plan pulled it together. So that's what I'll have to say. So and so I understand that there is, of course, here comes the port in the city with our own plans, and we want to put squares into what is a concentric, the universe, but at the same time, it should be clear, at least from the implementation side, that it was the West Oakland truck management plan that pulled this together, and then that all the levers are being used and pulled. So I caution, and I even encourage for everybody to have a different perspective on this, and let's use a West Oakland truck management plan to move all these parts forward, because this is the ship that's moving the entire thing together. So that's one. So let's not throw it all out completely, because once you throw, for that matter, you throw it to city council, then it's all, anything goes. So there's questions about federal funding. Federal funding is federal funding. It's federal funding states that it has to be tied to port commerce, period. Truck management plan or not. But at the same time, the West Oakland truck management plan, it was able to pull these threads all together. So we have a whole package So when you part and parcel it from one from the next, you don't have an entire package that looks, or for that matter, then you're cutting wind and momentum from it all. So I encourage everyone, so let's look at it together to move it forward. So we don't have to throw it all out the way. And if anything, I'm trying to crystallize the argument for pulling this item away from the West Oakland Truck Management Plan. It's a counter argument to doing so. That's it.
Thanks, Laura. Margaret?
I would like to add, at the end of the day, what the staff says to the Port of Oakland commissioners depends on which levers are going to be pushed to expedite the frontage road. As of right now, the commissioners don't even see the value of our health in West Oakland. The way, especially the way they have treated us around Eagle Rock. So why would they all of a sudden now see that the truck management plan has value unless there is more funding for the Port of Oakland through all this federal infrastructure money? So let's be clear. Let's be very clear. The port taking over this type of a project through this process of doing a steering committee is one thing, but at the end of the day, who will vote on this? It's not us, it will be the commissioners. And as a former commissioner, there's only one vote right now that see how to build health into this process, in which we have been trying to do what Prescott Green. So let's be very clear. This project is not about, the thinking of the Port Commission is not about being healthy, or having public health, and having buffers and barriers for this strip of land. They're only thing the staff is worried about right now, and the commission about the business of the port. Is this about the business of the port? No. This is about the business of West Oakland, which they do not have to seem to be concerned about.
Sounds like a mic drop moment. Yes. And so Richard asked, is the agreement available to be viewed? And the answer to that, Alicia responded that yes, it is online. David?
Can't add anything more to what Brian and Ms. Margaret said. I fully agree with what they've said. And this comes out of my own experience with the way in which the port has managed other processes. And so I think these are very legitimate concerns and need to be addressed seriously by the port director and the board. I will also say that there's a lot of confusion out there about what the port's message is out there about taking advantage of state and federal funding. There is a huge amount of money out there. They should be fully taking advantage of it. And I see that only sort of half-heartedly. You know, some of the divisions of the port seem to be trying to get that, but then others don't seem to be. And almost like all the money goes to LA, you know, on this stuff. So I'll stop there and just say Brian and Ms. Margaret said it very eloquently.
Thank you. And we've got, and we're at 8:23. And so Alicia, your hand is up. Like you should probably close us out.
All right, thanks, Randolph. Okay, I appreciate everyone's feedback, and think that, you know, having maybe a smaller conversation with some of you would be helpful, and can definitely, you know, get that happening. I appreciate your concerns. I don't have an answer tonight, but certainly can continue to work together.
Alicia?
Awesome.
One thing, Randolph, I would really want to make clear, Alicia is a member of our steering committee and a good friend, and I don't want her to feel like, you know, we ambushed her tonight. These are just concerns that have come up in the community in the past 2 weeks, and we felt we needed to raise them in this situation. So, you know, nothing personal. We love you, Alicia. Is a challenge. We have a challenge in front of us.
We do.
Yes.
I think we all know that we're amongst friends. So, and as friends, we're gonna try and give you back the rest of your evening. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate all the effort that all of you, you know, kind of contribute to this process. Thank you to the steering committee members, West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, and district staff. And with that, we're going to close it out.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
Appreciate you,
Appreciate it.
Alicia.
All right.
See you again, Elisa.
Good job, Randolph.
Yeah, bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right.